100 years ago, a very important event took place in Dublin. This event changed the course of Irish history. As the poet W.B. Yeats put it, a terrible beauty was born.
For 700 years, the people of Ireland have been trying to become independent of Britain, to have their own government in Ireland and to be allowed to practice their language, culture and religion freely.
There had been many rebellions and attempts to secure this freedom over the previous 700 years, none of which was successful. In the earlier part of the 1900s, discussions had taken place, and the people believed that soon Ireland would have its own parliament. In 1914, World War I began, and the plans to give Ireland home rule were postponed. Many of the Irish volunteers went to fight for the British against the Germans, in the belief that it would help the cause of home rule. However, another belief existed within the volunteer movement, that as Britain was at war, the Irish rebels should use that opportunity to strike. England's difficulty is Ireland's opportunity.
In 1915, some of the leaders involved with the Irish Volunteers and other organisations decided to secretly plan a rebellion, which would take place in the spring of 1916. The rebels needed guns and ammunition, and these were promised from Germany and the USA. In April 1916, the weapons were on their way, and the leaders planned to strike on Easter Sunday, April 23rd. Disaster struck on Good Friday, however, when a shipment coming from Germany was discovered by the British Navy.
The leaders of the rebellion were very confused. Should they go ahead with their plans or call off the uprising? Owen McNeill decided to cancel their plans and sent word all over Ireland that the volunteers were not to act on the following Sunday, but wait for further instructions. This message was also printed in the weekend newspapers.
The leadership in Dublin disagreed with MacNeill, and though knowing the rebellion was doomed to failure, decided that it should go ahead a day later than planned. On Easter Monday, April 24th, a terrible beauty was born.
Marshall arrives.
Volunteers up Sackville Street and stormed into the GPO. Customers were annoyed at the inconvenience, but soon realised something very serious was taking place. Two young volunteers named Eamon Bulfin and Jared O'Sullivan made their way onto the roof of the GPO, and for the first time ever, the tricolour was unfurled on the top of an important state building.
As this was happening, other commanders were taking over other buildings around Dublin city centre. The ultimate goal was to take command of Dublin Castle. However, this failed.
With the tricolour flying proudly over the GPO, Padraig Pearse, accompanied by James Connolly, triumphantly read the Public Lit Heron to the assembled volunteers and people of Dublin.
Irish men and Irish women, in the name of God and the dead generations from which she received her old tradition of nationhood, Ireland, through us summons her children to her flag and strikes for her freedom.
Pierce had written this document, along with the other volunteer leaders, to present the people with their vision for a Republic of Ireland. Those who signed the proclamation were Thomas Clark, Sean McDermott, Thomas McDonough, Padraig Pearse, Eamon Cant, James Connolly, and Joseph Plunkett.
A young man who grew up in Drumree was one of the volunteers under the command of Michael Mallon and Countess Markievicz in St. Stephen's Green.
My name is James Fox. I lived in Drumree, County Meath until I was 12 years old. My father, Pat, has a very strong belief in the cause of the Irish Republic. I share his ideals. For the past few years, while I've lived in Dublin, I've been training with Na Fianna under Countess Markievicz. I've even joined the Irish Citizen Army too. When my chance came to join the volunteers, I grabbed it with both hands. It is such an honour to serve my country under the command of Mr. Mallon and the Countess. My father is a proud man today.
My poor boy was shot and died on the second day of the rising.
Volunteers held out bravely for 6 days. They withstood attacks from British soldiers on foot and on horseback. But when the British Army began to bomb the GPO with heavy artillery from the gunship Helga, now moored on the Liffey, the roof of the GPO caught fire. Soon the entire building was engulfed into flames, and the volunteers, carrying the wounded, had to seek refuge in the streets and in the back of the GPO.
The volunteers in other parts of the city had also held their post, with the most successful of these being the small group in number 25 Mount Street, defending Mount Street Bridge. Only 4 volunteers had been killed at this post, while over 200 British soldiers had lost their lives trying to gain control of the bridge.
Padraig Pearse and the other leaders began to realise that to continue with this rebellion would result in unnecessary bloodshed, and they made the decision to surrender. Pearse, along with Nurse Elizabeth O'Farrell, went to General Law and surrendered unconditionally.
All 7 signatories of the proclamation, along with 7 others of the leadership, were found guilty of treason and sentenced to death by firing squad. They were executed between May 3rd and 8th, 1916.
For those who died that Eastertide in the springtime of the year, while the world did gaze with deep amaze at those fearless men but few, who gave their lives that freedom's light might shine through the foggy dew. Grace Gifford and Joseph Mary Plunkett were to be married on Easter Sunday, 1916. Their wedding could not go ahead on that day. In the very early hours of May 3rd, Grace was brought to Kilmainham jail. Joseph and Grace were married in the chapel of the jail. Just a few short hours later, Joseph was executed.
We are here today to remember and honour those volunteers who were part of the Easter Rising 1916, 100 years ago. The volunteers who were executed, the volunteers who died in battle, the volunteers who survived. These brave men and women carried forward the ideals and aspirations of the 1916 proclamation, and within 6 years, 26 counties had gained independence. Inspired by the proclamation of 100 years ago, 6 class have written a proclamation of their own, outlining their hopes, dreams and plans for our country as it goes forward into the next 100 years.
To all men, women and children who call Ireland their home. As the centenary of the 1916 Rising approaches, we in St. Chocnall's National School remember and commemorate the events that took place 100 years ago. We especially remember James Fox, who attended St. Chocnall's National School and who was killed in action in St. Stephen's Green on the 25th of April during the Easter Rising. We reflect on what the signatories of the 1916 proclamation would make of Ireland today. The republic they so longed for has indeed taken its place among the nation. Our ancestors called for equal rights and opportunities for all. We have come a long way, but there is still more work to be done. Having taken up arms for political reasons in the past, Ireland is now a country with its own voice, and we hereby proclaim that voice as Ireland's most powerful weapon against inequality and injustice. This newfound voice needs to be strong and determined to ensure that our hopes and vision for the future become a reality.
First and foremost, we need equality in education. Although schooling in Ireland is free, there are still many extra expenses for parents and difficult from families at a disadvantage. Children are among the most unfairly treated groups in our country. We strongly call for end to child poverty and better funding for education, so all of our children are cherished equally. We aspire to an Ireland that treats all of its sick people fairly and with kindness. Nobody should be forced to wait for medical treatment if they don't have the money to pay, and those who have the money to pay shouldn't be able to jump the queue. We also need to improve facilities for people with disabilities, both on public transport and our cities and towns.
We believe every Irish citizen should have the basic dignity of a place to call home in an area which suits them, and no child should ever be forced to leave a home where they feel comfortable, warm and safe. We feel there is much improvement needed to ensure gender equality in Ireland. Female representation in public and sporting life is improving, but there is a lot more work to do, and positive female role models are needed for the next generation of children. An Ireland of the future should cater for religious diversity in our schools and communities in general, and show respect, tolerance and acceptance of all races and religions.
Ireland is often referred to as the country of the thousand welcomes. This may well be true for tourists, but what about people who come here trying to escape troubled times in their own country? Many Irish people were taken into other countries during the famine. We should be more mindful of this and welcome as many refugees as we are able to care for. We proclaim the need to take better care of our environment. We must reduce our carbon footprint and work on our littering problem. Ireland is a beautiful country and we need to keep it green and clean for future generations.
Our ancestors have worked hard to preserve the Irish language and customs when they became endangered. We must continue this good work and keep the Irish language alive along with traditional music, poetry, dance, storytelling and games. Padraig Pearse himself said that Tír changa, Tír anam. Irish culture gives our strong national identity and it needs to be protected. We also enjoy and share in the cultures of those from around the world who now call Ireland their home. We think people should be encouraged to work and contribute to society. Anyone who wants a job should be able to find one, and workers should be rewarded with fair pay. Those who commit crimes should expect to pay the price. We aspire to an Ireland where everyone is treated the same, regardless of race, gender, or creed. It will be a place where anyone can achieve great things if they work hard for them. Ireland can only become a better place if we all play our part. We have inherited this land from our ancestors and we will pass it on to our children. Let us pass on a country worthy of the sacrifices that were made by so many so we could finally call Ireland our own. Signed on behalf of Scoil Seachna Neva Rongashay.